Well, Friday's Pac-12 Championship game is a chance for revenge against the Huskies, and it's the biggest Oregon football game in 9 years. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. If you have not already, like, comment, subscribe, rate, review, please, and thank you wherever you listen to or watch this show, which today is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Daily fantasy sports made easy. So what's on the line here at the game? Troy Franklin gets snubbed and an early look ahead to Washington, all coming up right here on today's show. But I was thinking about this, and I'll be completely honest with all of you. I'm incredibly nervous for the game. I'm excited for the game. But there is an element of nervousness there, because I don't think there's any way of slicing or dicing it. This is the biggest Oregon football game in 9 years. I fully believe that. Why? And the last game that I'm referring to was the national championship game with Marcus Mariota in that season. So you can look at, the Rose Bowl or that Pac-12 championship game. But the last time the stakes were this high, 2014. Retroactively, you could look back and say, well, this game was big. Well, that game was big. There have been big games. I'm not trying to argue that. But this is, in all likelihood, a direct win, and you have a chance to play for the national championship situation. Lose, and you do not. And it comes down to this one game. And that one game happens to be against the Huskies, a team that has ripped our hearts out in the waning moments of each of the last two meetings. And I know Oregon is favored by 9.5 points right now. I think that's a lot for the game. I also think the Ducks are capable of covering it if they play to their full potential. But man, the amount of excited nervousness I have for this game is higher than it's been in a long time. I was talking about this with my brother the other day. I am trying to lose myself in work so that I don't get so anxious thinking about this particular game. I think the stakes are that big. You've got Bo Nix's Heisman candidacy on the line, national championship, rivalry, Pac-12 championship. It's the last Pac-12 championship. Oregon's got a chance to win the first and last Pac-12 championship game ever played in the conference's history. I mean, everything is on the line here in this game. And the other reason that I think the stakes are just so big going into this one is I love where this Oregon team is at. I love where Dan Lanning has the program. I love the way he's recruiting. I love the culture. I love the coaching. Everything about him makes me think Oregon's going to play at a high level every single year as long as that guy is at the helm. However, even when you are that sort of program, even when you're that caliber of program like Oregon is, chances like these don't come around as often as you'd like them to. Maybe they'll be slightly more frequent in the 12-team playoff era. But this game, I don't think anybody's underselling it. The more I think about it, the more I think this is the biggest game in a long time, because I can't think of a singular game in which Oregon had given itself the opportunity to be in this position, right? You could go back retroactively and say, in 2019, the Arizona State game was actually the biggest game since 2014, maybe because Oregon ended up losing, and that's what kept them out of the college football playoff. You can make that debate. Here's the difference. This Oregon team is better than that one. I think this Oregon team has a defense that's just as good as 2019's, maybe even better in a couple ways, but 2019's defense was pretty nasty. I mean, the back end of that defense was just filthy good. I love the front of this defense, though, a little bit more than that one, even though it had a true freshman, Kayvon Thibodeau, on it. But this offense is significantly better than the one in 2019. I think you've got more playmakers on the outside. I think you've got a better schemed offense with a better offensive coordinator. Everything about it. I think that year's offensive line was really good. This year's offensive line was really good. I think this is one of the best Oregon teams that we have seen in the last 15 to 20 years. And they have put themselves and earned the right to be in a position to win one game against your heated rival who's beaten you by a field goal twice in a row in the last 2 years. You have a chance to make that all go away. You have a chance to make it all go away if you win this football game. Another way I was thinking about it was the Rams and the 49ers in the NFL have like a rivalry of sorts between Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay. They come from the same sort of coaching tree, and they both came into the league as head coaches around the same time. They've both had a lot of success. In the regular season, Kyle Shanahan has dominated Sean McVay. He's not better. He has dominated Sean McVay. But you know what McVay has that Shanahan does not? A Super Bowl ring. And I guarantee you, I've heard Colin Cowherd make this point correctly all the time. Kyle Shanahan would trade every single one of those regular season wins for the Super Bowl that McVay has, that he does not, as a head coach. I think Shanahan will get there because I think he's really, really good, which is not great for me because I'm a Seahawks fan. But hey, that's the way the world is right now. I'm all in on the Ducks because I think that Lanning is awesome. Bo Nix is great. And yeah, Oregon can compete for a playoff spot this year. But let me ask you something else right now. Do you think that Oregon is capable of being as good as this team is with a fifth-year quarterback, with a future first, early second round at the latest wide receiver in Troy Franklin, who I'm going to get to here in a little bit? Is there like all the pieces that are there? You've got JPJ, who's going to be an All-American at center. You've got Dorless, who is a high-impact player defensively. Like, there are going to be a lot of changes that we'll talk about all offseason for this team. This is an all-in sort of feel. It's not a, hey, let's make our best run at it, but no, our best chance to, make a push to get to the national title game is actually 2 or 3 years away. No, this team right here, right now, they're ready. And you have to go out and put it on the field. And at their full potential, they can get to the national championship game. It's just a matter of doing it. And you have to beat Washington this week. And you may be able to hear it. I mean, I'm recording this show on Tuesday, and this is how I feel. I am literally trying to distract myself. Earlier in my kitchen, I was doing meal prep, watching Harry Potter, and that was a great, stimulating distraction from thinking about how big this game is because of the team, because of the opponent, because of the stakes, the Heisman factor as well. And then the rivalry is just the cherry on top of it all. And what's happened in the last 2 games. And all that gets wiped away. All the bad feelings from those 2 games. It goes away, at least in my view, if Oregon wins this one. Because this game matters even more than the other 2. And the last time Oregon and Washington met, I said it was the biggest meeting ever in the history of the border war. Well, guess what? Here's the newest, biggest iteration. Because you cannot have the stakes any higher, except unfortunately for Husky fans, Michael Penix's Heisman campaign, I think, is toast. It'll be Bo Nix, probably if Oregon wins. And if Oregon loses, it'll be Jaden Daniels at LSU. That's the way it seems to be trending. And unfortunately, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's, a bummer. But Penix has had too many games that he's, not put up spectacular numbers. He's just not going to be able to overcome Jaden Daniels in that regard. But Bo Nix could, because Bo has been fantastic. So, oh, man. I'm so ready for the game to start already. A lot of things to watch for in the matchup, which we'll get to. And Troy Franklin, man, you talk about disrespect. We'll get to that in just a moment after you get over to Prize Picks, of course, because that's the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. The easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. On Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you'll watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy, so your entries stay in play, even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half, does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz? You can find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Use code LockedOnCollege for that first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. I don't even know how I'm going to be feeling right before the game kicks off. I might be a nervous wreck, but it's comforting knowing I won't be the only one, right? I think there are plenty of Oregon fans that are feeling the same way. I think there are a lot of Oregon fans that are supremely confident. I'd warn you to not get overconfident. We'll talk about later in the show. Thank you for tuning in, by the way. If you want even more Locked On Ducks stuff and you want insider content, that is where you got to go head over to SUBTEXT. Free 14-day trial. Then it's just $5 a month. You get even more in-depth thoughts and analysis from me, little inside, scoop and such, anything that I hear, breaking news, reaction, chance to talk with me one-on-one more often than on social media, and you get priority mailbag. So all those perks are over there. If you go join at SUBTEXT, appreciate everyone that has subscribed over there. So Troy Franklin, let's talk about this, is not one of the 3 finalists for the Biletnikoff Award, which is awarded to the nation's top wide receiver. Now, the players who have been selected over him are not exactly slouches. You have Malik Neighbors down at LSU, who is the nation's leading receiver at over 1,500 yards. You have Rome Odunze at Washington, who we're going to see on Friday and who we know is very, very good. And you have Marvin Harrison Jr. at Ohio State. Now, here's the problem that I have with Franklin being left out of it. He is having the greatest season individually in Oregon wide receiver history. That alone is not a reason for him to be a finalist for the Biletnikoff. He has better numbers than 2 of the 3 guys who are selected over him. Rome Odunze does not have quite as many yards. He's got a few fewer receptions and 1 less touchdown. Marvin Harrison has a couple hundred fewer or less receiving yards. I think the same number of touchdowns and not quite as many receptions. So Neighbors being in there at LSU, I get it. I get it. Do I think LSU is juicing stats to try to get Jaden Daniels the Heisman? 100%. 100% that is happening. And guess what? If I were LSU in that position, I would be doing the same thing. Because if I'm not playing for an SEC championship and I'm also not playing for a national championship, well, then what do I have left to raise the brand of the program and, try to get as much awareness out there about why LSU is a premier destination for quarterbacks in the transfer portal era? And there are going to be a lot of names in the portal every single year. Every year, that's what's going to happen. And so Jaden Daniels being a poster child for, hey, come to LSU as a transfer and you can, win a Heisman Trophy, whether we, win the SEC or not. Yeah, that's a tremendous branding and marketing opportunity for the school. So I completely understand it. That said, should Bo Nix win it if Bo wins a Heisman? Yes, I believe so. Will he? I think so. I'm more confident saying Oregon gets into the playoff with a win over Washington than guaranteeing that Bo Nix wins the Heisman Trophy with a win over Washington, assuming he plays well, which I have no reason to suspect otherwise at this point in time. Knock on wood, of course. But I look at Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors and I say, okay, I understand him being in there. But Franklin has more receptions, more yards, more touchdowns than Rome Odunze and more yards on the season than Marvin Harrison. I think my biggest objection is the Marvin Harrison component. I think he's a great player and a fantastic NFL prospect. But because he had preseason Heisman hype that has continued for reasons I can't quite figure out, it's faded now that Ohio State isn't going to make the college football playoff, barring an absolute just collapse from everybody who should be ahead of them in the latest edition of the rankings. I'm recording the show before those come out. It does bother me. It bothers me because Ohio State has a reputation as wide receiver U, and Rome Odunze has been really, really good this year. If I'd selected my 3 finalists, I would have left Marvin Harrison out of it. I would have. Not that he hasn't had a great season. He has. He absolutely has. But if you haven't put up as good of numbers as your peers, if you're splitting hairs, that should be a deciding factor. Not the eye test, not your NFL prospects. This is a college award. The Heisman Trophy is a college award. It has nothing to do with how well you're going to do in the NFL. Tim Tebow won the Heisman Trophy. Johnny Manziel won the Heisman Trophy. It does not matter. It should not matter. It's a college award. And I think Troy Franklin got absolutely snubbed. Here's the upside, though. How many yards do you think Troy Franklin's about to go for against Washington? They have a really good number one corner over there in Jabbar Muhammad from Oklahoma State. He's really good. Really, really good. Franklin, I think, beat him for, let me find the box score real quick, but had a really good game against him, though Muhammad made his life difficult, for sure. He had a great game against him in Seattle. I suspect he'll have a great game against him once again because Troy Franklin is indeed very, very good. He went for 154 yards on 8 catches and a touchdown in that particular game earlier this year in Seattle. So maybe you should go check out my friends at Prize Picks and take the over on Troy Franklin receiving yards. Maybe that's the thing you should do. Maybe it serves as motivation for him. I think the entire Oregon team is highly motivated, though. I'm bummed for him because he's had such an awesome season and he deserves to be at least a finalist there. But you know what? That's just the way it is. So, oh well. One more thing that I kind of forgot to mention as I glance back at my notes. I think the last time Oregon played a game of this magnitude was the 2014 Pac-12 Championship game. I would love more than anything for this game to go the way that one did. That was an absolute blowout. I don't think Oregon is blowing out Washington. I think the Huskies are too motivated and too good for that to happen. I do think the Ducks are going to win, but I don't know how easy it's going to go. And my heart rate and blood pressure are going to be so high on Friday night throughout the entirety of the game. But 2014 was the last time Oregon had an opportunity to win a game and then have a chance to play for a national championship. That's the last time. There have been other matchups in games where Ohio State, for instance, or Michigan State 2015, or the Arizona State in retrospect. But when Oregon has actually had a team that I feel is good enough to win the national championship, and they're in a position ahead of one game to win it all, I think that's the last time the team has played on a stage this big. So stoked, and hopefully Dan Lanning just has another great year too. Chip Kelly in year 2 went to the national championship game. Helfrich in year 2 went to the national championship game. Cristobal in year 2 won the Pac-12 and won a Rose Bowl. I really hope Lanning follows suit. Let's get to the mailbag here. Again, subtext is how you get priority access, but YouTube comments and Twitter always available at Smalls_55 or at Locked On Ducks. DMs and mentions wide open. This question from Blazer Duck here. Spencer, Oregon is playing Washington in the Pac-12 championship game. Indeed they are, my friend. My number one key to the game is make Penix uncomfortable. What does Oregon have to do or change this time around to get pressure in his face and result in sacks, quarterback hurries, and hopefully turnovers? I think the two most important units in order in this game for the Ducks are the defensive line and the secondary. Those are the units that if they play well, Oregon wins. If the defensive line gets pressure and the secondary holds up, Oregon wins. I feel really confident saying that. If Michael Penix has time to throw, I don't know what his health situation is, so don't ask. Nobody really has any idea. He can still make really good throws. And I'm not going to dive too deep into, he's hurt. He hadn't been the same. I don't know. I feel like he's going to be pretty motivated to win this football game. His Heisman candidacy is all but over. Washington is getting, disrespected in the sense that they're an underdog going into the game. Like, I think Penix will be ready to go, but the Oregon defense has to be ready. And the biggest key in the way that Washington has, found struggles this year offensively is when you get pressure up the middle, because Penix is not particularly mobile. And if he does turn out to have an injury, that makes him even less mobile. But he's a guy who kills you from the pocket. He is not someone who wants to roll out and make plays on the move. He is not a Bo Nix type. That is the biggest difference between their games. So I think the biggest key is Dorless playing the way he did, and Jordan Burch, frankly, against Oregon State, and then Jeffrey Bassa and Justin Jacobs and Jamal Hill. The way that Oregon has blitzed their linebackers this year has been really effective and really, really good. And interior pressure is the biggest way to disrupt this Washington offense. And if Oregon is able to accomplish that, it helps out a secondary that's likely going to be without Jaleel Florence and is going to have Dante Manning or Nico Reed or Triquez Bridges trying to guard guys back there. So you got to be able to pressure him. I completely agree that that's the number one key. But in order to do that, I don't know that Oregon has to change a ton. I mean, remember, before that final drive, Penix had 250 yards passing. I mean, I'll take that. I'll take that. If you tell me right now, Penix has 250 yards passing and under 30 points, yeah, which is again where the defense had him until that final drive when the offense didn't convert. That's what the stat line almost was for Penix. If the defense plays like that once again, if Popo gets some pressure or Dorless or Birch or whoever, Casey Rogers, and you blitz the linebackers effectively, I mean, Bosch has been an absolute animal blitzing this year. If that works out defensively, yeah, then Oregon will be in a good spot. Speaking of the secondary, there's a little bit of turnover there on the back end. Should we be concerned about it? You don't have to be concerned about anything when you check out LinkedIn, because when you're hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board, by the way. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion with a B professionals, which make it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many qualified candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. So go post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right. Appreciate everybody being tuned in. Can't wait to see as many of you as possible this Friday in Las Vegas. Another mailbag question here from Nathan. Then we'll get to some fun ones to kind of take out the seriousness or whatnot, or you'll see. But question from Nathan: how worried are you about Odunze picking on Bridges, or are we fine given that Jackson is playing? Well, he's talking about Kyrie Jackson and Trikweze Bridges, of course. I worry about Odunze against anybody because you can't actually stop him when the ball is thrown in his direction accurately. His timing, his hands, his body control, they're all too good. They are all way too good. So I think that's a pretty difficult matchup to stop. The key is not letting Penix get off those accurate throws. And if you're able to pressure him, that makes it a lot harder. And he has missed some throws over the last couple of weeks, primarily because he has faced some pretty consistent pressure. Oregon State's pass rush, I thought, did a pretty good job. Not a great job, but a good job in times. I think the rain probably helped him out in that one. But Washington State last week did a good job of pressuring him, and he didn't have his best game. So I don't think Kyrie Jackson's going to shadow Rome Odunze, because when you have Jalen McMillan and Jalen Polk, who are also really good wide receivers, yeah, that's going to be a challenge as well. So, all those guys are capable of playing like a number one wide receiver. Odunze is clearly the best of the bunch. I think everybody's well aware of that. But if I'm Washington, yeah, I look at what happened last time out when Kyrie Jackson and Jaleel Florence got hurt, and Trikweze Bridges actually played very well. I know he gave up the game-winning touchdown, but he was in really good position. And I think the biggest key is when Washington can take end zone 50-50 shots, don't put those guys on an island. You could try to put Kyrie Jackson there, but even he got beat by Jalen Polk last game with Washington for a ball down into the corner of the end zone for a touchdown. And so I think that the game plan has got to be, when you get inside the 20, you got to have a bracket on Odunze and make Penix go elsewhere, because that's where he wants to go with the football. I think you make someone else beat you there, because Polk and McMillan are both really good. They're not Rome Odunze there, and I don't think anyone's going to shadow him. And I think whoever is in the game, whether it's Dante Manning or Trikweze Bridges or Nico Reed, whoever is not Kyrie Jackson, that's who I'm going after if I'm Ryan Grubb, their offensive coordinator. Because consistently, when they face high-level passing offenses, those guys have not been as good as Kyrie Jackson. So it's going to be another big test for the safeties and the corners in this game as well. But they could be aided in a really, really big way if the defensive line is able to get some pressure, more than they did in the first game. I thought they actually did a pretty nice job getting pressure in the first matchup. I think they can do better, and they are playing some really good football right now. If Jordan Birch shows up the way he did against Oregon State, Oregon will be in a really good spot there. But I'd look for Dorlus and Popo to kind of have big games potentially, because the interior of that offensive line is where I think Washington is the weakest. So, okay, couple of fun questions here. It's been a very serious show, and it's a very serious week, so we got to keep things light and fun just to end the day. This is from Casey. Fun hypothetical for mailbag question and this week's conference championship game. If it comes down to the last possession, which would not be good for the Ducks, by the way, between penalties and Camden Lewis and Adunze on the other side, yeah, don't want it to get to that spot. If it comes down to the last possession and Washington has to drive the field in a 2-minute sort of situation, do we put Troy Franklin as a shadow on Rome Adunze so we can actually have a decent shot at a jump ball in the end zone? Bad idea or good idea? LOL. Well, if it were a Hail Mary, not a terrible idea. Of course, not going to happen in reality, but it does kind of touch on something I was hinting at a moment ago, which was I don't think Oregon is going to have Kyrie Jackson shadow Adunze. And, as good as Kyrie Jackson is, and I think he's had a borderline all-conference caliber season, I don't think he's Christian Gonzalez or who else has been like total shit? For a couple of years, Mikael Wright was this sort of guy where I would have said, yeah, I want him to shadow their best receiver. I think if Kyrie Jackson is a guy who's most comfortable playing as the boundary corner, then just play him as the boundary corner, because very rarely does Washington put Polk, Adunze, and McMillan on the same side of the formation, because I think that tips their hand pretty clearly where they're going to go with the football. So you're always going to have one of those three to deal with. You're always going to, assuming McMillan is healthy, you have to be able to have guys step up and make plays. And hopefully Dante Manning plays the way that he did this past week against the Beavs. I mean, that was probably the best game of his career. He needs to have the next best game of his career against Washington for Oregon secondary to have a good chance here. So here's the last one here. And I did not write down anything for this, but it's a fun question to do, kind of off the top of my head. This from Nuri Natube. That's a new one. Spencer, here's a fun question. If you can squeeze it in, always. If you could assemble your own Duck dream team with Duck players from any era, who would your starters be? Go Ducks, quack. I'm going to do this like off the top of my head, a starting 22. I'll put Mariota at quarterback over Bo Nix by just a hair. I'll take LaMichael at running back. I'll have Troy Franklin as one receiver. I'll have Jeff Mail as another one for the third receiver. I'm most familiar with guys that, I've watched my whole life. Probably for the third receiver, I'd lean probably Josh Huff. I really, really liked Josh Huff. At tight end, give me Ed Dixon as one. Give me T. Ferg as the other. At center, I'll take Jackson Powers Johnson, though Max Unger's a close second. I'll take Penei Sewell at left tackle. At right tackle, I'll take Tyrell Crosby. At left guard, that's tough. Shane Lemieux was really, really good. Andre Urieta-Goyena was, I think I botched his name there. He was really good as well. I'd probably go with Shane Lemieux there at left guard. At right guard, boy, Stephen Jones got a heck of a case. I mean a heck of a case there. So I'll go with Jones in that spot. I think he's bona fide stud. At one defensive end, Kayvon Thibodeau, obviously. My other three defensive linemen are Brandon Dorlus, Eric Armstead, and DeForest Buckner. Gosh, what a defensive line that would be. At linebacker, give me Casey Matthews as one. I do love the way Bossa is playing, but I think I'd probably go with Troy Dye, who's playing for the Vikings right now. I was watching him on Monday Night Football the other night. I'd go with Troy Dye. At one, I'd go 5 defensive backs. Javon Holland is your box safety. Your strong safety. Let me come back to that. Free safety, I'm taking John Boyette 100% over the top. I'll take McKinley at the other safety too. Boyette and McKinley are my two safeties, with Javon Holland as the third. And then the two corners, Christian Gonzalez, 1. Who would the second corner be? I'm thinking of like a Walter Thurman the third. I think that's a pretty, I mean, that's a pretty loaded squad. That's a pretty loaded squad right there. But a lot of different ways you can go. So if you think I overlooked somebody, by all means, drop it in the comments. Love doing those sorts of questions to end the show on a more fun, lighthearted note as we enter what is definitely a very serious week against the Huskies, and it's all business on Friday. But wanted to have some fun with that. And then of course, DeAnthony is the punt returner. Frankly, give me Ross James as the punter. Jackson Rice was also fantastic. Place kicker, I'm an Aiden Schneider kind of guy. Thought he was good. Morgan Flint was also great, but I'd probably go with Aiden Schneider there. So that'd be my team. Gosh, what a squad! A lot of great players that I did not name there. My second running back, by the way, I'd have LaMichael one. I'd probably have either Jonathan Stewart as the second back. I think I like Jay Stu a little bit more than Royce Freeman. So that'd be the lineup there. Good question. Loved it. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.